Okay, we're live.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. It's 6 o'clock.
She's muted.
You're muted.
Pam, you're muted.
There she is.
I know, I couldn't unmute it for some reason. He had to send the thing to it. I'd like to call this Tuesday, April 28th, Electric Utility City Commission meeting by teleconference to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triola.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell.
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge led by the Vice Mayor.
I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and
liberty
justice
and
for all.
justice for all. No prayers for this meeting.
Okay, are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, let's move right on to our presentations. The first item A is a presentation of the 2019 annual report by Mr. Ed Liberty.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and make sure I can get the right presentation up here on the screen. And at the moment, there we go. Here I have it. Okay, does everybody have up on the screen the annual report from 2019?
Nope. It's just showing the file. You need to double click on it again. Do we have to open it? I can open it. Oh, there we go.
It should be up on the screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously we're halfway through our fiscal 2020, but we wanted to make you aware that we did complete an annual report for 2019. That annual report, I believe, has been sent, but it's also available online on citizen-owned-energy.com, which you can link to through the city's website over to the utility page, or you can go to citizen-owned-energy.com directly. So the purpose of this report was to, at a very high level, provide our customers and our constituents and people that are interested in how we're doing, what we actually accomplished in 2019. So this is in the spirit of projecting, good information. We have a lot of good news, things that we've accomplished, and those are outlined here in this document. I'm not going to go through every single page in terms of reading it to you. You can certainly do that. But as you scroll through, you'll see that it's done in a format very similar to what we did with the strategic plan. We do have copies available. We were going to hand these out during the mayor's address to the city. So they are printed, they're ready to go. When we're all back together and we can hand things out again in print form, we'll certainly get everybody copies of these. But in the meantime, it is available on the website. So we do support the strategic plan. There is a message from me expressing some of the things that we've done in 2019. Big thing that we wanted to point out here is that we have significantly reduced cost over the years. That's an interesting slide. Help with FMPA help from FMPA to help us put this together. It tells a good story of where we were if you go back to pre-2019 or 2009 rather, where we've come in the last 10 years. So we've reduced our rates from $124 down to $108. This doesn't include all of the taxes. And then conversely, you see where the US average has gone. So our cost reductions that we're actually seeing would be in the top right-hand corner in our cost per kilowatt hour. So the cost to secure energy for our customers has come down significantly since 2017, when we were at $73 and change per megawatt hour. That has come down to, for 2019, we finished the year at $61 and change. So we've run a nice downward trend. Some of that is cost cutting, some of that is restructuring of the electric contract that we previously had with OUC. and some of that is decreasing fuel costs, which we did see some in 2019. And we're going to talk more about what we're seeing in coming years. Now, we did all of this while making $6.6 million in contribution back to the city in the form of shared services, but also the general fund contribution. Those two items together were $6.6 million in 2019. So your citizen-owned electric company is contributing back to helping run the city. And also what goes into the general fund, of course, is going into fund a lot of programs in the city. So we are contributing to that. The biggest story for 2019 were the improvements in reliability. So we've talked about this a lot. We've had a 39% reduction in the key indicators for distribution system reliability. We touch on the fact that we have more to do. And we talk about the capital plan, which was approved. And now we're, of course, waiting to do the funding through the bond issuance. We talk about sustainability and energy efficiency. There's an energy efficiency story that it isn't widely known, but the city did invest quite heavily in projects to reduce energy consumption, things like 4,500 plus streetlights that were replaced with LED versions, improvements in indoor lighting, motion sensors, lower wattage bulbs indoors, new air conditioning systems where it made sense, and water conservation reductions. Those things were all undertaken, not in 2019, but actually in 2016, 17, and a little bit into 18. So it has helped us reduce our carbon footprint, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about carbon footprint at the end of this meeting tonight. Big story coming too, of course, is solar. We've made some significant commitments to solar. We made those in 2019. It's a very interesting statistic that we put together. In 2019, our energy supply had 63 watts of solar for every customer. And that's simply our own solar farm, which was done as a part of the Siemens contract, and it went on commercial in 2017. So 63 watts of your energy for every customer is coming from solar. Where are we going? By 2024, we're going to 1,423 watts of solar per customer. So there is a green story here. The city has done a lot to reduce its carbon footprint through energy efficiency and to change its fuel mix away from fossil fuels and more towards solar. So as those projects get built and come online, you're going to see us going up to this 1,423 number. We also talk about ocean current energy and the role that that plays. There's a lot of work done by the city manager, the mayor, various commissioners, and of course our lobbyists working in Tallahassee and through the FAU relationship to try to secure grant money to continue this project. So we want to make sure that story is told and gets out. So we're not shy about saying that we have challenges. We've made progress and we're going in the right direction. Good news as well is that our energy send out to our customers grew in 2019. So we go back to 2015, we see a spike in 16 and it came down, partly due to the fact that we reduced through energy efficiency. Customers use a little bit less as well, but we reduced through various energy efficiency programs in the city, and then we resume the growth pattern. So we've got a growth story here. We're not a small dying utility, we're a growing enterprise. Likewise, our customer counts have grown from 26,130 in 2015 to 26,872 in 19. So there's a growth story here. And the more customers that we have on board with us, helping to cover the fixed expenses and contributing to the overall enterprise and the good of the city, the better, not just for the electric utility, but for all of the businesses in town as well. We talk about our solar projects and some of the major milestones here. 1.7 megawatts atop our own landfill, and that's the picture that's there. In 23, we'll have, in summer of 23, we'll have the 10 megawatts coming online from FMPA. And then by the fall of 23, another 26.55 coming online. On the customer front in 2019, we also made some significant changes. So we improved the ways that customers have to pay. We got the Paymentus portal working. That's working well. And we also got the Pay Near Me function working well at multiple locations throughout the city. So while there were some glitches in the startup, it is continuing to work. Customers are relying on it. And what we've done in the Pay Near Me exercise, by moving that business out of our own customer service center, we've transferred 4,000 walk-in customers into these commercial establishments. So whether it's a CVS, 7-Eleven, or a Family Dollar, they're now seeing much more foot traffic into their stores, and the customers are paying the bills there. The convenience fee that we once charged, which was $2 a transaction, is actually $1.99 per transaction at these locations. So roughly $90,000 to $100,000 of revenue went from the city into these locations. So the other benefit, of course, is that we now have many, many more locations and many more hours during the day and days during the week when customers can make their payments, which is helping our customers. They don't need to show up at the only city office that was set up to take payments only during business hours. They now have a lot more flexibility to make their payments. If they choose to pay in cash, they of course can still make those payments there, and that's not a problem at all. So that's working. We actually did a fair amount of work on our system hardening and reliability project. Every pole that we install, every section of system is designed to withstand the new Category 5 standards for us. In the middle picture there, you see these things we call these pole wraps. It's a very slippery piece of plastic which we're wrapping any new pole with, and as we do work in alleyways for vegetation management, or our crews do work, we're wrapping poles with these slippery sections of plastic to help prevent the wildlife from climbing the poles. They may still find a way to get there from an adjacent tree or run down the power lines or the phone lines or cable lines from an adjacent place, but we are seeing benefits from doing this, particularly in the areas where our infrastructure is along the canal banks, where the iguanas tend to nest and congregate. So that's helping as well. Our vegetation management program is paying dividends. We're seeing decreases in outages due to tree contacts, but also due to animal contacts, which is all due in large part to the vegetation management work. So that's having an effect. This next section, I won't go into a lot of detail. You can certainly reference it, but we wanted everybody to understand that we're not just pursuing a path of our own, the electric utility. We are a department of the City of Lake Worth Beach, and we do support the City of Lake Worth Beach strategic plan. So what we did in this section was we identified the pillars of the plan, and then we identified the activities that the electric utility is involved with that support each one of those pillars. And I won't go through those in detail right now, but they're certainly there for folks to see as I scroll through. And of course, it's a very nice graphic design piece that was done for us by our support system at Simple Mind, as well as our staff and various departments in the city that contributed. So that's the annual report, and certainly available for people to take a look at and go through in more detail.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on to presentation item B. Ed, you're going to give us the 2020 mid-year financial results and current key performance indicators.
Yes, and I'll begin a slideshow here. Let me see from the beginning. Okay, everybody should see the title page for the mid-year financials, correct?
Not yet. Still seeing the previous. Good.
Is it rolled over now? You see it?
What's at the top of it?
It should be the City of Lake Worth Beach logo, and it says electric utility presentation.
No, I still have on the screen your citizen owned.
Okay, let me do it this way. I may have had to, how about now?
There you go.
Okay, I had to switch it, my fault. Okay, so we are at the midpoint of the 2020 fiscal year, and we're going to walk through where we are on some key performance measures. Because of the current COVID-19 crisis, we are not going to do the full report that you're used to seeing with a lot of the performance metrics. We're still gathering data, we're still tracking it. I still review those numbers, and we'll present those later on. But we thought that at this point it would be most important to focus on really the financial measures and the customer interaction measures, which are very important at this point in time. So this first slide is a way for us to explain what's happening in terms of the volume of energy that we're sending out to our customers. and where that's coming from. So I'll just give some explanations here. This first column is kilowatt hours fiscal year to date. And if we look at the bottom, this is telling us that the amount of energy that we have delivered to our customers has increased by 1.7% over the prior year. And that is information as of a couple of days ago. Now that is a significant increase. We would normally budget for increases of about 0.5% to 0.25%. We're up significantly over the prior year. So the total amount of energy that's going to our customers is up significantly. The next column looks at the biggest driver historically, which is degree days. So this is telling us that our degree days are up almost 16% over the prior year, which is explained by the unusually warm weather, which we saw in March and then certainly in the first few weeks of April. We're seeing warmer than normal weather. Customers fiscal year to date are up by 1.066. So we're seeing more customers, we're delivering more energy, and we have higher heat, which is tying into more energy. Now these customer numbers, if you look at these, you may say, wait a second, we don't have 161,000 customers, do we? The answer is that's 161,000 customer months. We look at this in great detail. We say, hey, if you're a customer for 12 months, you have 12 customer months. If you're a customer for 1 month, you have 1 customer month. So what we're measuring here is what is the increase in, if you will, customer intensity. So it gives us a feel for how intensive was our customer base through the whole year, not just at the end point of the 6 months or the end point of the year. This is a better way of looking at the number. We look at our April numbers alone. April, on a month-to-date basis, we're up by 3.49%, call that 3.5% over last year. Significant increase. 27% increase in degree days for April. Customers at the end of the month were growing significantly. So we've added more customers as well. And very interesting, our daily average peak, the peak load that we reach in any one day, has gone up from 70.9 to 73.71. So our peak loads are increasing. What's the overwhelming story here? We're growing and we're sending more energy out to our customers. This slide attempts to show what's happened since the COVID-19 crisis came upon us. What effect has it had? So the blue line on the top is the energy use pattern for largely residential customers, all customers that we have on what we call a single phase meter. The reddish or orange line, I'm colorblind, down below is polyphase meters, meaning likely commercial accounts. So not all of the commercial accounts are polyphase meters. Some of them are single phase meter, but this is a very good way of seeing what's actually happening. If we look at it prior to this event beginning, we can see that our commercial base was consuming approximately 30% of the energy that we brought into the system to deliver to customers. And that our residential base was in the mid-50s, mid to high 50% or so, maybe close to 60% of our energy was going into the residential customer base or into that single phase meter base. What we see happening at or around March 11th, certainly by March 13, 15, 17, these two curves started to wander off the prior pattern, right? Residential is going up to near 70%, and the commercial is dropping down to near 20%. So this is probably information that doesn't surprise you, but what it does for us is it gives us data that supports the assumption that commercial business is dropping off and residential is going up. Residential is going up, of course, because our customers are likely home all day and not going to work, or they're telecommuting. So they're using more energy than they did before, and the commercials are dropping off, but they don't drop to zero. They're still dropping off, and you can still see patterns here of variability where they seem to come down for a weekend, would come back up, go back down. So there's still a cyclic pattern to it, indicating that they're likely still doing some kind of business during the work week and then dropping off over the weekends. We still see that, but we do see a floor to the pattern. This next series of slides is an attempt to quantify the financial impacts of what is happening right now in the marketplace and certainly in our customer base. So this slide is what we call a 6 and 6 financial forecast. So a 6 and 6 forecast is 6 months of actual data plus 6 months of forecast data. This top section here is what we were tracking towards, that's 6 months actual, and we call it base case forecast. That was actual plus budget. So if we took the overperformance that we've had financially year to date, and we layered in what we expected from a budget perspective through the end of the year, we expected that we would come in at about $3.2 million better than budget on our operating income line. And for simple description, that's just our operating revenues minus our operating expenditures. Is a good way of just taking a look at what's happening financially. In the bottom section here, we said, hey, natural gas prices are decreased, our power cost is decreased, but we've begun to waive certain fees for our customers. So if we were to make a new forecast, which effectively we did before the COVID-19 crisis, we'd say we're no longer expecting a beat of 3.28 or almost 3.3 million. We're expecting to beat and if you will, add back to fund balance $5.7 million more. So anything above zero here is good because it's going back to fund balance. We then realized that COVID-19 changed our world, right? It rocked our world for everybody. And not knowing what the impacts of COVID-19 would be, we just did a series of 3 slides which said, where do we think we're going to be if we experience a 5% reduction in revenue between in just the last 6 months of the year? So let's say that the curve doesn't continue as we were forecasting, and now it comes down by 5%, and then we do 10%, and then 15%. So these were numbers, not to say that we think it's going to be 5 or 10 or 15, but to show you what is the impact. So the number to look at is in the bottom right-hand corner. So if we were saying we could come in 5.7 million ahead, if we take a 5% hit on revenue, we go from 5.7 to 4.1. So roughly a $1.6 million hit to electric utility revenue. These are just electric utility numbers on these slides. If that is a 10% reduction, we drop down to 2.5 million. So from 5.7 to 2.5, a little over $3 million impact. Again, this is assuming that the patterns that we're seeing manifest themselves at 10%. I'm going to talk about the patterns that we're seeing, what I call leading indicators. But if we saw a 10% cut in revenue between now and the end of the year, we're looking at about a little over $3 million impact to the arc or to the landing spot. And then of course, if we see a 15% reduction in revenue, we drop from 5.7 to 0.8. So almost a $5 million impact to our revenue, net income rather. So what does that mean? That means that if we thought we were going to put $5.7 million into the utility fund, into the electric utility fund balance from the starting point, if we see reductions in revenue of 10%, that's going to be down significantly, and of course 15% down significantly. Now we get into talking about the leading indicators that say, help us forecast where we think we're going to come in, because we are only, in spite of the fact that we think we've been home or working remotely for 5 or 6 weeks now, we're only a little over 24 business days. We have 22 to 24, 25 business days of data to look at. And we're trying to put binoculars on and look way into the future and say, where do we think we're going to be in 6 months if we continue at these rates? So this next group of slides is about leading indicators. What do we think is going to happen? So this slide, we went back and we looked at 14 months worth of data and came up with the average daily number of cuts that we would be doing. And what we're seeing here is that the daily average in the past was about 27 cuts per day. There, as you can see here, as you look back over the number of months, if you go back to February of 19, you can see that some months we were 450, we made up at the 604, 620, 707. There's variability to these numbers, but the conclusion was over about a 14-month period, the daily average was about 27. Most recently, after looking at the data with 22 business days of cuts, and obviously we all know that we've stopped making cuts, but that number would be significantly higher. The averages would be up around 120 plus. We're showing 2,500 plus accounts that would have been cut. And these revenues here are total amount of revenue to the city, which of course includes all of the utilities. Now, there are some customers that have been making payments even though they've gone beyond the cut date. We're not chasing them to get that money, because we recognize it's a hardship right now. And while we would certainly love to be paid the money that we're owed, we're not cutting these customers. So some payments have come in even beyond the cut date. This next slide, and I can try to magnify it a little bit, is just a heat map or a pinpoint, if you will, of how these cuts, avoided cuts, are distributed around the city. We've taken some areas, for example, parks. Of course, the airport's not a part of the territory, and there's John Prince Park, and there's the golf course. There's no accounts there other than city accounts, but it shows you the distribution around the service territory, both electric and water, because these cuts affect the water customers only, including the territory sections where it's water only. But of course, looking within the city limits, you can see the distribution. So the message here was, this is a problem which is pretty uniformly distributed around the city. It's not isolated to just one section of the city.
Ed,
Let me try to make sure I didn't mess it up here.
Commissioner Robinson?
well, I want him to specify that these are cuts for non-payment, or cuts for non-payment. They're not just move outs on an ordinary basis, right?
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Good clarification. We have move outs and we have move ins, but this is only the cuts that would have been made for non-payment that of course have not been made. So it's just a purpose to show the distribution of the affected customers that we're helping right now by not cutting their accounts.
Thank you.
Now, there is assistance available to customers that's provided through a county agency. This data we update every day. Probably got more customers on it now than it does when this slide was produced a few days ago for your benefit. But after 10 days of calls, we had 10 days of doing this, we had about 1,400 calls that we had made. So what does that mean? So we have enlisted 2 of our employees from our energy conservation group that are not doing energy right now, that have been making phone calls to customers. So the goal is to contact as many as possible of the customers that have gone past the cut date, and to make them aware that there is help available to them through an agency. And we give them the information for the agency so that they can reach out to the agency. So at the time of producing this particular slide, we had made 1,400 calls. 457 of those calls, the customers indicated that they were appreciative of the information, so they were interested. We did find 3 customers that had moved, so that we cleaned up the database. We found 3 customers that had moved. And the interesting part of it, though, is in spite of the fact that we had 457 customers interested, the feedback we get from the agency is that they've only received 204 applications. At that point, 26 applications were processed and 75 were currently being reviewed. So the rest were waiting for additional information from the clients. So the good news is that our outreach to the customers to let them know that there were agencies available to help them, and pointing them to the right agency with the right information on how to reach them seems to be working. The bad news is we don't know, of the 204 applications that have been received by the agency, whether they're for Lake Worth Beach electric utility, water utilities, sewer customers. They could be customers of some other utility in Palm Beach County. The agency has not given us that breakdown. When the agency gets a request for assistance, my understanding is that they evaluate those, they review those, and they ask for information from the clients. My assumption is to determine the financial need. So as they work their way through that, when they determine that they're going to provide assistance on behalf of the client, they will send the utility, the involved utility, what's called a commitment letter. And once we get that commitment letter, it's another 30 days or so before we start seeing the revenues associated with their assistance for that customer. We do have customers who have gotten assistance from this agency in the past. It's too early in the process to have seen any new commitment letters. As of a few days, I did check with the team and we had not gotten any new commitment letters, but there's a time lag. It'll take them some time, customers, to reach the agency to process it, exchange the information necessary, and then finally get the assistance help flowing to the customer's account. The assistance, if it is provided, does come directly to the utility that's involved. It doesn't go to the customer, it comes to the utility, I believe, through a check. There's a lot of talk in the marketplace that other utilities are doing things for their customers. These slides are in two different formats because additional information came in. We're all familiar with what FPL advertised for their customers as a reduction. That is merely reinforce that a returning the customers money, which they were going to return to customers anyway, except they're doing it as a lump sum. And then the following month, the bill will go back up to continue to fund the fuel balance. Now, there are, in this next 2 pages, as of last count, 21 municipal utilities that have done similar things, have announced similar initiatives, and this is a listing for you to look through. As I point that out, and this slide is a little blurry because it's a download of a slide from the Florida Municipal Electric Association. I point out that of those 21 utilities that are going to do something for their customers, 16 of them have rates that are higher than Lake Worth Beach's rates. So those 16 utilities are higher priced, those municipal utilities. 5 of them have, or 6 of them, 15 have rates that are higher, 6 have rates that are lower. So while it's certainly admirable that they're in a position with their fund balances and their accounts to be able to do that, I do point out that a number of them have rates that are higher than ours. We're already well below them. This particular slide, which you probably have in better detail in your packets than is transmitting on the screen, is directly from the Florida Municipal Electric Association. This is the slide for the benchmark 1,000 kilowatt hour customer. And this was as of February of 2020 that they had on their website. And you can see here that Lake Worth is certainly, below the municipal average, which is this dark line right here. And we're well below the investor-owned utility average. So our rates, while we all would wish that our rates were lower, to put this in perspective, we're amongst the better grouping. We're certainly in the lower half of what's happening in the state with respect to other municipals, and we're below the investor-owned utility average. Now, that's great to say. Now, if you're a customer who's getting a bill and you think that bill is high, you say, I want my rates to go down. And we certainly want to help get our rates down. And we were on a path to rebuild our fund balances. We could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then along comes COVID-19. Our options and our status of where we are, if we look at through the end of the year, our fuel cost, our power supply cost, looks like it'll be about $1.3 million below the budget. And that is due partly because our natural gas costs have come down, and the marginal cost of power for us is driven by natural gas prices. So it's no secret that natural gas prices are down across the country and certainly in the state of Florida. However, we've also gotten the benefit, the fact that our new contract with OUC, which went into effect January 1 of 19, is much more flexible and beneficial than the prior contract. And because of confidentiality, trade secret requested by OUC, I can't discuss that in a public forum. Suffice to say that when we made the contract announcement, that there are benefits to that contract. The savings that we were generating, one could say, if you're a customer, you should ask that question, well, if you were saving money, what have you been doing with it? Well, we've been rebuilding that electric utility fund balance, which was in a negative position at the end of 2018. We're waiting to see how it finished 2019, but those dollars were going into rebuilding those fund balances. which we're required to do. That fund balance likely remains, regardless of where we finish 2019, that fund balance remains likely below the 3-month minimum that was recommended by Stantech. So I referred to the Stantech report from 2019 in October of 19 when we were going through the budgeting process, and I just did an excerpt here. And Stantech had recommended a range of 3 to 12 months. We were working our way towards this 3-month target. So we were below the 3-month target. They would like to see us in the 3 to 12-month range. We were working to get ourselves in a 3-month target. That 3-month target was a positive 10.5 million. And if you go back to that first financial slide that we put up, we were, making on track to take a big chunk out of that. The world is different today, right? What had we done? What next steps are underway? Before this began, before this COVID-19 crisis, we had already retained Leidos, who was a leading, best in class, I would say, partner for doing rate analysis. They were shortlisted statewide by FMPA, and then we competed them against the rest of the participants on the shortlist again and narrowed it down to Leidos. And we began work with them in early March with the first data exchanges that are necessary. So they're performing what we call a cost of service study, which is the first step in evaluating our rates. And they would have to work closely, of course, with Stantech to understand the fund balances and where we're headed, the trajectory we're on, factor in customer growth, energy use per customer, which is decreasing very, very slightly. The energy intensity of our customers, as we add more customers, the new customers tend to be more efficient than the prior customers. And certainly you can imagine in any new home being built today, apartment or condo is more efficient than the one that it replaced, right? So the energy use per customer is trending downwards. All of these things go into the cost of service study that's being done by Leidos. What we're also doing is we're looking at revenues almost daily. I'm driving the customer service team crazy. They're getting used to it now. And Clyde, Franco, who was on the phone tonight, we're looking at these numbers every single day. Right now, we have what are called the leading indicators, the cuts, the 30-day list, the 60-day list in terms of lateness, and seeing where people are coming in. As soon as we have the 2019 audited financials, we'll have a better sense of where we started the year in terms of the bar, how much progress we made towards erasing the negative balance at the end of 18, and then how we are year to date towards that. So we don't have a crystal ball. What we do have are leading indicators of where we believe the trajectory is going. What I can tell you is that based, and there's no slide on this because I just got the information yesterday morning and evaluated again today. It looks like, looking at the 30-day receivables, that's customers who are 30 or more days late, but not yet 60 days late. The 30-day receivable is showing roughly 10% for commercial and 10% for residential. Customers are late. So that has increased about 180% over where we were prior to the COVID-19 crisis. So that is just a leading indicator. We do know that customers will try to make payments, but we also recognize that some may not be able to, and some won't. But we're looking right now in the 10 to 11% range of our revenue, expected revenue is not coming in. The expenses, of course, continue on track, as you saw, our energy use is continuing to grow. So we're sending more product out. We're not being paid for all of it.
Commissioner Hardy, did you have a question? Commissioner Hardy?
Sorry, yes, I have a few, but I have one related to this one. I'll save the rest for later. How many of those accounts that are typically, that are, 30 days late, but not 60 days late, how many of those tend to turn into cutoffs over time? Like what, I guess, percentage of that we might say, 30 days late what percentage of the amount owed is typically just lost over time?
I don't have that. I don't know what percentage of the 30-day late pay before they get to the cut date. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we can certainly get it. We do know that in terms of what's owed and what ultimately goes out for collections, for example, we know that the collections numbers run $230,000 to $250,000 a year, and that's all utility revenues, not just electric. That's the aggregate. So very, very loose correlation. If you say that before this began, we were cutting on average 27 customers per day, and we would ultimately see as much as $230,000 to $250,000 out for collections, we're running, well over 100 cuts per day that we're not performing. I keep reinforcing it because I don't want anybody to think we're actually cutting. We are not cutting customers. But if you extrapolate that to the extent that there's some kind of a loose linkage between those two numbers, you could say our collections amount could be much higher down the road than they have been in the past. Hypothetically, I won't know the actual number until we've experienced it, but just looking at leading indicators, trying to forecast where we might go. So in terms of, what do we do? We have a lot of leading indicators that are beginning to firm up, is to continue to bring this data to you on a regular basis so that you have it in your knowledge base, so that you have the adequate information on which to guide us in terms of policy and how you want to go to the next steps. In terms of how customers are making their payments, this is less related to the immediate crisis, but we wanted to be able to show here how our customers actually paying us. So if we go back to October of 2019, we can say that 48% of our customers were paying us by credit card, 28 by check, e-checks and ACH, and we had a cash component. And we show each month as we made the transition to a fully working Paymentus and Pay Near Me system to now we're, in March, and we will update this again as we keep going each month. In March, 43% were by credit card. But the biggest number, of course, is which we expected, was that the cash went to zero because they're not paying us the cash by walking into our offices. They're now paying in cash at the Pay Near Me locations. But interestingly enough, if we were running 11, 12, 10% cash payments at our offices, we're now running around 7, 6, 8% of cash payment at the Pay Near Me locations. So we believe that that's because more customers are paying perhaps by check or some other form that's not yet showing up, or auto pay is a slight bump up. So this was just a way of showing that we had made the transition from customers walking through the door to being able to access these other locations. So it's a very, very good sign. So we see that 8% of our customers are now paying using the Pay Near Me function. The online payment functions are in the 36% range, 20% range for customers paying by mail, about 10% paying to the ACH function, and the Paymentus function to the IVR is running at about 14, 12, 15. It's declining slightly. So this is just information. You can see the walk-ins. Perhaps the biggest number here is that the walk-ins into customer service were well over 4,000. Now they're 0. Now, at the time that we decided to do this, we didn't know that this thing COVID-19 was going to land on us, right? But I have to look at this and say, wow, because we put these other tools in place, those over 4,000 customers a month aren't trying to get into the customer service center to do a transaction. We have been able to transition to a 100% remote operation. So all of the payments are now able to be made remotely without coming into our offices. And that includes not just payments, but all of the move in and move out requests, establishing new accounts. So the customer service team, to their credit, not that there weren't any hiccups in getting them the right technology and working to get the right phones, but they have transitioned and have done this well. So we are supporting our customers, all of the new accounts opening and previous accounts closing remotely. And that's working very, very well. We've got 402 new accounts were opened since March 17th. 301 were closed, not because we asked that they be closed, but because the customers, gave notice and closed their accounts properly. But we gained 101 customers through this process. So we continue to grow. So those are the prepared remarks.
Commissioner Hardy, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate the information. For the folks who don't understand why a small locally owned electric utility that is trying to build its fund balance, why would we suspend shutoffs at this time? When you look at the cost to the utility, which Ed, you did a great job of outlining. I think it's $336,000 and unpaid bills, which is not an insignificant amount. The reason why we would do that is because there are a lot of people who obviously have become jobless, and this is going to sound redundant to most of you, but there are folks out there saying that there's no good reason for us to do this. Look, we got 26 million jobless people in America, and in Florida we have the lowest unemployment benefits in the country, and most of the people who are applying for unemployment benefits can't even access them. The last count was 22% of the over 700,000 people who applied for unemployment benefits have received them. And so that leaves about 4/5 of the folks who have applied out in the wind without a job, without any money, but their bills still coming. And, there are folks who don't qualify for unemployment benefits because they were, for example, self-employed folks. Some of them qualify, but there are folks out there who are small business people, who aren't, contractors, et cetera. They're not going to be able to access those benefits anyway. So there's a lot of financial carnage out there. And, we obviously, from a selfish perspective, we need people to maintain their hygiene. And that means we can't, or we shouldn't, if we are interested in ourselves and our own health, given that this is a pandemic, cut them off. But then from a compassion standpoint, you're seeing something that's happened out there that's totally out of the blue. And, it's tough to say that we are going to treat our customers who own the utility with less generosity than FPL is going to treat its customers who are strictly customers. And so, that's an issue there. To the questions I have for Ed, there's a slide on here, and I'm grateful for this second screen, that there are 3 that shows 5% reductions to the revised forecast, and 5% reductions in revenue, and we're able to see how that flows down to operating income, however that's defined. Give me a sense of which one of those scenarios is most likely. I mean, like if I were just doing this at home, with an envelope and a pencil, I would say, well, what's the average, revenue per subscriber on the residential and commercial side? And then I would say, well, let's assume that this crisis lasts for, 3 or 4 months. And then I would say, let's pretend that we never get that revenue back. And I would say, okay, that's how much revenue that we're not going to get. But I don't have that information in front of me, and so I'm not sure which one of these scenarios is more likely. And I have some follow-ups.
So the current information, the leading indicators that we have in the last week or so, and certainly in the last couple of days, lead us to believe that we're in that 10 to 15% range in terms of revenue shortfall. But I'm taking a big risk in throwing that out there because it's based on a few days. So we're 22 to 24 days, and we're looking at accounts that are 30 days or more late. So that number may be lower than what we would be telling you a month from now when we have a full 30 day, so if somebody got their bill, for example, 15 days ago and couldn't pay it, they're not on that 30-day late list yet, right? So this is gonna, we're at least in that 10 to 15%, and at least 10% based on the leading indicators we have as of in the last couple of days. Now that's why I really want to report back on a regular basis and track this. We're tracking it daily to see where it goes.
I appreciate that. And I guess going forward, how would the reduction in revenue, which leads to an increased reduction in operating income, because we got some operating leverage there, how does that affect our ability to finance the SHRIP?
I have my own answer for that, but I really should defer to our finance director or city manager. But
I am really interested to hear your hunch, and then I'd like to hear from Bruce.
Okay, my suspicion is it is the not building fund balance as rapidly as we thought we could will have an impact on the potential outlook by a rating agency. However, I point out that we were on a path that the $5.7 million beat that I mentioned. That is higher than what we forecasted for the year when we set the budget. So we were beating it. We were beating the spread by more. Now we may wind up back down to flat and with little or no gain, but so that they would not look favorably at the inability to rebuild those fund balances. But on the other hand, because of current events, if we were able to show that the growth is there in the customer base, and that this was an aberration because of COVID-19, that may wash it. But I'm out of my realm. That's, financial people will give you the good story, then the bad story, then the better story, and they bounce it back and forth. They say, yes, but this, but that. I think there's a great story to tell. The issue is going to be, how are we going to collect those revenues from those customers that we haven't forgiven. We didn't say that we were forgiving it. We said that those revenues will be due to us in the future, but the path that we picked to recover those revenues, because we've written checks, right? We paid for the product. We paid our bills. So we'll have to recover those revenues in some form in the future.
Bruce?
Yes, thank you. Piggybacking on what Ed just said, the rating agencies look at fund balance as a critical measurement, if you will, at the viability of being able to pay back. As Ed mentioned earlier on, the fiscal year 18 fund balance was negative. And this is a very, very good example of why the rating agencies want this COVID / coronavirus pandemic is a reason that they look for healthy fund balances to get through these difficult economic times. The fact that we do not have a fund balance or a minimal fund balance, depending upon the results of the fiscal year 19 audit, anything that erodes that will not be, in my opinion, looked upon favorably. Going into the fiscal year 20 bond issuance that we're looking at, the rating agencies are going to look at our overall fund balance on all the different funds, be it the water, sewer, well, the combined utility. And then again, anything that happens to erode that balance is going to be not favorable. That all being said, another thing that we have to remind ourselves with is we already have debt coverage ratios that we must cover. Fiscal year 18, the electric company, the utility, was not able unto itself to cover those ratios. It was only because of the water and sewer combination that we were able to bring those back up and therefore be compliant with the ratios. if by not collecting revenues and having that 10%, 15% delinquency across all funds, all the utility funds, that's going to put us in jeopardy of being able to comply with the fund ratios for fiscal year 20. So I would just be very, very cautionary that we have to have those debt cover ratios moving forward, because that is a condition, that is a legal requirement that is part of the bond. We must have that coverage ratio, or we're in conflict. Yeah.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question, I guess. Obviously, and I don't know how operating income is defined here, but whatever it is, not all of that is going to flow to fund balance. Not all of that is going to flow to the city in the way of that transfer payment, right? So there's interest after that operating income. How much of that? How many other things? How many other expenses, if we were, doing this out on a P&L, how many other expenses would come after that operating income line, and what kind of amount would they be, and what, could we expect fund balance to gain or not gain in each of those scenarios, I guess?
Yeah, the way that's calculated, that's the net gain above all of the other fixed expenses. So all of the variable expenses are already covered in that calculation. So that's the net impact to the bottom line would be whatever it was forecasted to be before. It would be $5.7 million better in the base case, projection. So we can certainly get you the detailed breakdown of all of the things that are in the financials. I know that Clyde is on the phone on the video. We can certainly chime in. But that $5.7 million is what would flow all the way through, boom, to the bottom line and make it $5.7 million better.
Okay. And so like that $5.7 million is after we pay interest to anyone that we owe, after the contribution to the general fund.
Yes. It takes into account the cost of power that we had to buy to create the additional revenue, all of that.
Okay. All right.
That's already taken into account. I also want to point out too that the negative fund balance that we finished 2018 with was due to a feature of an old contract, which triggered. So it was a one-time event.
Right.
That particular aspect is not in the new contract.
That was about $500,000.
No, it was more than that. It was over $3 million.
Okay. All right, that's my bad.
Well over $3 million of additional power costs, plus the cost to repair the turbine, which was another 1.2 million. So what put us into the negative was that unanticipated, failure of that generation device, GT2, and the subsequent impact under the contract. Those features are not in the new contract. That old contract was one that dated back to 2014, was negotiated largely in 2013. But that's behind us now. So we were well on our way, and then boom, we hit the fund balance, and then in 2019 we're waiting for the financials. We believe that we substantially climbed out of that negative position, and then 2020 was when we were going to make the leap ahead. We're still depending on how long this goes, we're going backwards, but we may not be leaping ahead at the rate that we thought we were.
Okay, and then I guess the last issue, I guess on the table is doing something for our customers. And, what I'll say is this is, we have things that we have to finance over a period of time. And, I hope that we can still finance these improvements. What I will also say is that I think the goal around here, everybody's goal has been to try to make sure that there's no difference between how people perceive us and our competitors, right? Because if they perceive us as a bigger pain, to deal with, then that hurts the city because we can't attract the people who we want to bring into the city. And what I'll say is that I wish we were in a position to do something for our residents, because again, that speaks to the competitiveness between us and FPL. To the extent that we're not able to do so, it's not a good thing for us, frankly, and it doubles down on that narrative. And I get that 15 of the other utilities that are doing this have rates higher than they're doing things for their customers, have rates higher than ours, and 6 don't. I just wish that we could do something for our customers. And it sucks that we can't find a way to do that right now. That's all I'll say about that at this time.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, my goal is to keep the power on for our residents. And I know moving forward that there's a lot of infrastructure needs that we had talked about, and we need those bonds, and we need money in the bank to make that happen, to keep the power on. I think it's going to continue to be a struggle right now, even if we're able to move forward and get out of where we are right now with the problems we're having with the pandemic. We're still going into hurricane season. They're telling us that there'll be another wave. Right now everybody's at stay at home. We have electric, we have cable. I hate to see that in the middle of hurricane season with no power. So, my main goal is to, keep the power on for the residents. And, we have some infrastructure needs that we need to work on and make sure we move forward with to do that. Ed, you had mentioned on one of your sheets, the county assistance with utility bills. And you had mentioned we've contacted 1,403 people, and only 457 people have, I think it's taken advantage of or showed interest. That's 946 people that said they weren't interested in somebody else helping them pay their bill. So what else can we do along those lines to try to move forward to get people to take advantage of a program that already exists?
So as we make those phone calls, you can imagine, people are surprised that they're getting a phone call from the utility to try to help them do this. So many are appreciative. It may be a matter of pride for some that they don't want to admit on the phone to somebody they've never met that they need help. Some are appreciative. They're polite that they got a phone call. What we are doing now is for all customers that would have typically gotten, for example, a late notice, instead of getting a late notice, my understanding is they're going to be getting the document which will point them to the agency for help. In addition to that, all customers in the next round of bills, I believe, are going to get the information on the agencies for help, and they're also going to get census information, as a matter of fact, in the next round of bills. So we're continuing the outreach in that manner. But ultimately, it is up to the customer to say and admit to the fact that they need help and to reach out to the agency. We can't do that for them, but we're going to continue to reinforce it.
And just to reiterate, we are not turning anyone off, and we're actually waiving late fees too, correct?
That's correct. We are not turning anybody off unless they specifically request us to, because, for example, they've moved out. We have waived late fees, so that's a good point. I mean, it might be described that we're, tend to overlook that we are doing something for our customers. This city, through this body, reinforced that we were not going to cut people, and we have not requested people make some minimum payment to us right now. We've said we're not going to cut you. You will owe us this money someday, but we're not going to cut you, and we're not going to charge you a late fee. So, if you're a business and you have people you need to pay, or even a private citizen, whether you own your property or whether you rent, it doesn't matter. You now have that money to use to do other things within your life, right? We hope that they will eventually pay us back, but we are doing something for them right now, saying this particular bill you can wait on. That's what we've effectively done.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yes, thank you. It says 1,403 calls were made, and it said 457 customers were interested. How many conversations were actually had? We're all elected officials. We may all have had some experience with phone banking. We know that very few of the calls you make actually turn into conversations. Did you keep track of the number of conversations you had? Because I guess that would tell you the real meaning of the 457 number as far as customers who were interested.
Yes, we do. We keep a detailed spreadsheet with probably a dozen or so fields on it. That goes into a lot of detail with respect to the nature of the conversation with the customer, whether we got a voicemail, whether the phone was disconnected, we have that. As a matter of fact, we can certainly provide that list. It's updated daily. It's an extensive spreadsheet that the team contains, and they update it daily.
Yeah, my guess, having called lots of people on the phone before, is that you made 1,400 calls. You had a fraction of that actually turned into conversations. And probably a decent percentage of the conversations you had, people were interested, although there are probably folks, like you said, who were not. So I think, the relevant metric would be, as far as, people taking advantage of what's out there and available for them. How many customers are interested in relation to the number of conversations you actually had with customers.
We can certainly provide that data. I believe Franco is on the phone. He's on the line. I see him here as customer service. If you want to go into more detail, I could ask Franco to go live with us right now and give us a comment. Or I'll leave it up to you if you want to get into that next level of detail.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to, make a comment that my original comment, my question was, if this is happening, if these are the numbers, what more can we do to maybe try to get more people to take advantage of a program that already exists? And again, you don't have to answer now, Franco. I think, if Commissioner Hardy's concerned that we may not have physically touched the people, how do we touch the people? How do we physically let them know that there's a program that they could take advantage of?
Well, I just wanted to answer Commissioner Hardy's question. The 400 and change that expressed an interest, they were interested, that was a definite conversation. So we have the detailed spreadsheets. We'll provide that information to you about how many voicemails were left, how many conversations were had, but those 400 and change that said they were interested, that was a conversation. To your question, we are doing a three-prong approach, right? So one was the telephone outreach. The second approach is instead of getting a late notice, we're mailing out every single morning. We're mailing out the flyers in English, Spanish, Creole, and now we're including the census flyer as well. And then the third prong is a bill stuffer. So all 27,000 bills that go out next month will have in the bill, again, the flyers in all three languages. So we'll continue to dial, we'll continue to work on the outreach program, the telephone outreach program, and we'll continue to spread the word with the flyers, but it's really up to the customer to go online or call them and apply and go through the rigorous process. Obviously, they've got to show documentation, they've got to show financials to see if they qualify. That's up to the customer. We're doing everything we can to educate the customer, tell them that the dollars are there effective April 1st, and that they've got to hurry, right? Because before the funds run out, they've got to hurry and apply. So we're doing everything possible to express that or communicate that to our customers.
Vice Mayor?
And when those calls go out, when you leave a message for those people, when the calls come back, where is it being routed to? Is it being routed to your office and or somebody that can specifically answer those questions, or does it come through regular call system?
It's being routed directly to the two members of the conservation team. So there's a direct dial number with a voicemail. And so those messages come right back to them and they call them right back.
Okay. So we don't have a chance of losing them in, the system.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah. Well, comments. I know, and the customer service and Ed is doing everything we've asked them to do in terms of customer service. Are we going to talk about the numbers and what we're going to do about the numbers? Because the non-payments are going to continue and they're going to increase. Are we going to talk about raising the rate, even on a temporary basis? This bonding sale or purchase, however you want it, the market we had counted on bonding for Ed's operation. We need to be selling the increases in efficiency and income that he was making up to the virus. We're not going to shut off anybody's electricity. It's going to be a temporary glitch, but we need to get some handle on how we're going to address the shortfalls. Are we going to raise the rates? When are we going to talk about shutoffs after the stay at home or whatever? However, we're going to base that decision on. Is that a county decision, state decision? I'm more interested in talking about getting us back on track for numbers, because we haven't talked about cutting expenses. We got consent in the millions of dollars here. Is there anything in that consent packet that we can eliminate or cut? And are we going to talk about the payments from the electric to the general fund that aren't going to be there? I just wanted to change the direction of the conversation, because knowing that we're not going to shut anybody's electricity off while we're under this emergency situation.
Ed?
Okay, so I'll address that in portions. First of all, I would not recommend adjusting rates in the middle of an emergency. What I would recommend, though, is that we take a more holistic view, because this is not a problem just for the electric utility. I have my feet in two canoes. One is I present utility financials, but we also run customer service. And customer service numbers show the impact to all city utilities, whether it's water and sewer and refuse, all of those functions. And then, of course, there are other areas of the city that are impacted as well. It maybe impacts the rents, it may be impacted taxes, certainly parking revenues, golf course revenues. So it's a bigger financial picture, which has to be looked at with the assistance of the finance department and maybe the financial advisory board. I don't think this is as simple as just, and I'm not looking to take this on entirely as saying, if I fix the problem for electric, we will fix the problem for a city. That's not the case. We need to look at it more holistically. Now, in terms of us, performing financially, we're in the process of doing this cost of service study, which will help us determine where our rates should be going forward. Hopefully we don't, consume all of that money. At some point we have to come out of this and folks have to begin to pay us back, and we need to come up with what's that plan. And that plan really ought to go hand in hand and mesh with the plan for them to pay their indebtedness to the other city departments. And if there's a shortfall, how is that going to be recovered across the city? Ultimately down the road, this is a zero-sum game. I say jokingly that we don't have a printing press in the basement like the federal government does. We as a city have to tie these all together, and it has to balance. So we need to do it all together. So it's not just an electric utility issue. It's a citywide issue. And I'd be looking for the finance department to work with us to come up with solutions that address not just what we do with electric revenues, but how we handle water in arrears, sewer in arrears, right down the line.
Well, but we hired the rate consultant before the virus. It's changed everything.
Yes, and the rate consultant was only looking at the electric rates, was not looking at any of the other rates, was only electric rates.
And we have a 10% non-payment approximately, and 90% of our citizens are paying.
That's cool.
And I'm saying that 90% of our neighbors and the good citizens of Lake Worth, all of them, whether they're paying or not, want to help each other. And if we did a temporary raise, what would the consequences be? I don't know how. We need to talk about numbers to get back. That's all.
Bruce?
Yes, thank you. I think we're talking, let's divide the question. There's two issues here. One is a cash flow issue. And you're very much on target with the fact that with the delinquencies, our cash flows are going to be impacted. But there's also a income recognition issue, is that if we do not forgive the fees, the utility rate-based fees, we may forgive the late fees and that type of thing. But if we are still charging and not forgiving the utility fees, then those incomes will be repaid to the city over a period of time, and then they will become part of the revenue recognition. So, and also if we do it on an accrual basis, you'll see that those revenues have been billed but not collected. So I think we want to be very, very careful relative to increasing a rate, for example, to collect the timing differences, and then in next fiscal year or a few months from now, we collect those very same fees. So to Ed's point, probably best to wait and see where we end up a few months out. And then if we had to do a rate-based fee early fiscal year next year, I think that would be more of the appropriate time to do it.
So you're guaranteeing that we're going to get back all that we've postponed in payments?
No, I'm not guaranteeing
All
that.
right. So no, my point is that
No, we're between the rock and the hard place. I understand that, but again, there's a cash flow issue and then there's an income recognition issue. And if we act right now, we would be reacting to the cash flow issue and possibly, for lack of better words, doubling up.
Well, then how's it going to affect the bonding? Well, I mean, we're going to move forward with the bonding anyhow, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
not being postponed.
No, it's not being postponed. The rating agencies,
We need to affect their decision.
yes. The fact is, we anticipate a very strong 19 rebound after 18. We were looking at a very strong rebound in fiscal year 20 before this. That being said, the rating agencies really want to understand what the plan of the city is. Okay, everybody's facing the same issue with this pandemic. So what is the city's plan to recover will be one of the most important things. And if we can articulate a clear and concise plan that recaptures those lost revenues over a period of time, we should be okay. But if we go up and say we're forgiving this and we have no plans to recoup, that would be another negative impact. But if they know that the city is going to establish policies to collect those lost revenues, we should be fine.
Well, in raising the rates, that would be an attempt, and we're relatively speaking still lower than a lot of other companies' rates. If we inched up slightly, if we were in the, just got in the top third quarter of all the competition, what do those numbers mean? I want to be competitive, but we're right in the middle, and we've we've got issues. Unless we're going to start talking about cutting somewhere.
Well, then I would, I would go the other way. The fact that you're, as a finance director, I'm going to, say, I liked it, the idea, of making sure that we are collecting our revenues. That is good fiscal policy. But again, I just wanted to caution, let's not overreact, because we are going to be collecting. If the intent is that we're going to collect and not forgive, then we, over a period of time, we should be okay. It's a timing issue. It's a very sensitive issue. I know you guys are more sensitized to that than I am.
The checks in the mail?
No. Well,
Well, you know what was funny, because we started this conversation, from the dais with talking about how other companies were giving back money to their residents and communities. And that was the start of the conversation. Now we're talking about rate hikes. And didn't you mention in the last meeting, was it, that you said that those rate hikes were temporary? I mean, it was a give back for 1 month, but then they were actually raising the rates the following months?
Yes, that's correct. At least in the case of FPL, and I just hate to keep invoking FPL, but they are the local example, and they're out there. It is money that they were going to give back to the customers anyway. Instead of doing it over probably a 12-month period, they're just going to do it as a lump sum. But their overall costs were going up because they had more expenses that were for good purpose in growing their portfolio that they recover from their customers, and were all authorized by the Public Service Commission. So it's a money that they're going to give back over 12 months. Instead, it's a lump sum, but the rate's going back up after they do that.
Okay, and what was the average gift that they were giving in that 1 month?
The average gift was about $22 based on 1,000 kilowatt-hour customer.
Okay.
So it might be higher if you were a bigger customer, or smaller if you were a smaller customer.
Okay. Commissioner Hardy? Your mute's on.
Our rates are close to FPL's right now. Ed, is that right?
Yes, they are. We're not at parity, strictly speaking. We got the parity in February of 18.
And then they lowered.
Since then, they made some moves down. We have not gone up. We've stayed flat, but they went down a little bit. So they're porpoising near us. At some point, they may come back to us, but right now they're a little bit lower than we are.
Okay. And Herman is, thinking like a business person, and he is on the right track to solving what Bruce has described as the cash flow problem. You have to come up with money from somewhere if what you're trying to do is solve the cash flow problem. And then that led us into a discussion as to whether we're talking about, forgiving or recouping, revenue that's been lost on these accounts, which have become delinquent as a result of folks being unemployed during this crisis. And I'll just, look, here's the frustration that I have, right? And we've discussed this before. This has been discussed, ad nauseum, but we have a small utility, and we don't have the economies of scale of our immediate competitor. I recognize that there are, probably about 24 utilities in the state of Florida. We're not competing with, Tallahassee's, municipal utility. Our competitor is FPL. And so, we don't have the advantages that, they have, and it's a little bit more difficult for us to do what we need to do by our customers. And my frustration has been for a while, why do we continue to do this? It's difficult for us to keep doing this, and I wonder if we might seek strategic alternatives in the future. And Ed, what strategic alternatives means, and Bruce, what strategic alternatives mean. It is so difficult for all you guys in the electric utilities. You guys have such a difficult job to do what you do with what you have been given to do it, but we insist on doing it. And we don't even want to try an alternative to that, which would be, and I understand this may have been done years and years ago, over a decade ago, which may be going to our nearest competitor and saying, let's figure out if we can make a deal here. And obviously we would do this in consultation with our residents and in consultation with our workers and our unions, and obviously in consultation with, us, the elected body who's supposed to represent people. But we have not been able to do what FPL has done without great difficulty, not for our customers. We just haven't been able to do it. And it's going to be so difficult and on the edge of a knife getting there, right? Before the situation, bonding this was going to be hairy. We had to do everything right. We had to build fund balance. We had to do all these, we had to reduce the contribution to the general fund. It was difficult before this, and now it's not going to get less difficult. Why are we continuing to do this? And so, that's my spiel. I obviously don't have, support for that on this dais, but I wonder why we continue to bang our head against this wall when there is potentially an alternative that we have not really explored. I'm interested in what an FPL would say. That's all. And also, there's obviously the financial situation between the utility and the general fund. But then there's also the fact, and you can't deny it, that there is a drag on the value of property in this city because of, despite all the improvements that we've made, reputation is sticky. There's a drag on the value of property in this city, which is also our tax base, because of the perception of Lake Worth utilities. And that's a fact. I was talking with someone who's a well-informed person, and it still makes them uncomfortable, the idea of coming in and buying a home in this city. So again, I commend you guys, Ed, and all the employees in the electric utility. I commend you, Bruce, for working through this hairy situation financially, but it's not going to get less difficult. And I don't know why we won't call FPL up on the phone and see what their posture is. And we won't know what their posture is unless we do it. We can speculate, but we absolutely will not know. That, those are just, my thoughts there.
City Manager? Your mic is off.
If I could address a couple of things, I think to what Bruce was talking about and making sure that we maintain a commitment to, at some point, come up with a program to allow people to pay back as something that we're going to receive in the future. If it doesn't even happen in this fiscal year, it's important to maintain that relationship with what was used eventually somehow gets paid back. The fact of the matter is, as the economic conditions dictate, at some point, landlords are going to probably also be suffering from non-payment as well with these same accounts. And there will be a certain percentage that there's a failure rate. We just don't know what that is, Commissioner Robinson. And I think as time progresses, we'll kind of have a better feel for what that looks like when we have these conversations about what the future looks like for charges and rates. And also its impacts on the general fund, because let's be really clear that we always understood that the retained earnings from our electric utility, water utility, gets swept over for a large part into the general fund because it doesn't perform well. And, we, as Commissioner Hardy said, we kind of teeter on a knife's edge with balancing all these various activities between these funds. But we do rely on those utility profits to come over and help us pay for the sheriff's contract and the various activities that are under the general fund. But I want to remind everybody, since we started this mission, we clearly understood the electric utility was the largest disincentive at the time for people considering to invest or to come into the city or to move into the city at all. There was this argument going out. And we committed to a process to change that reputation, to turn it from a disincentive into an asset that people value, and then go into one day maybe even branding. At that time, we also concurrently looked at valuing the utility so that you never put a for sale sign in front of your house if you don't know what you're going to ask for it. and you want to ask for the most you can get. You don't want pennies on the dollar in a fire sale, so to speak. So we spent time looking at that, and we also were concurrently watching what Vero did, which went over a 10, 11-year period. And they were very much tied to the same relationships we have with FMPA and the debt service. So you could expect a 10, 12-year process, even if you decided to reach a price that you could agree to. But the real travesty in coming to this city and looking at the backlog of infrastructure, it was just endemic across all your infrastructure. And we were able to work on the roads. We were able to work on the water, the sewer, the drainage. And while we didn't do it all, we've made significant leaps into addressing the worst. The same thing here with the electric utility. Think of it as like your roads. You've got all this transmission distribution equipment that goes out, and it affects greatly our reliability. Most people are really angry in the past about the reliability issues with Lake Worth Electric, going back to the hurricanes. And it's because there was, things that got argued, it got caught up in the politics of this city that really ruined the reputation of the electric utility. But more importantly, the utility stopped investing in itself. That is the big thing. And if you want to use an analogy, the roads that weren't done in this city, the dirt roads, remember, Mayor, the roads that you couldn't have curb appeal because there wasn't a damn curb. To use the analogy that somehow a competitor is going to come in and all of a sudden invest a buttload of money into infrastructure is like saying, well, we're going to, let's eliminate the city of Lake Worth Beach so the county will come in and pave all the roads. And that may or may not happen. I'm not saying that the county wouldn't be willing to do that. I find it highly unlikely that they would, acquire an area and want to come in and do that. I don't know that FP&L would want to come in and immediately or over time do that. So we're really confronted with this. Whatever you guys do in the future, we want to make sure that if you consider doing anything, that you do it at the best possible price that you can get for it, if that is a decision y'all want to make. But don't make the residents and the customers wait with unreliable infrastructure for the next 10 years because we aren't able to figure out how to finance and invest in an asset that's actually spinning off a tremendous amount of profit. Ed's made this very profitable, and Bruce, they've worked very hard, and we've worked together to come up with a system that's spinning off a lot of cash. And up until COVID, we were really on track to go to this bond issue and do really well and sort of catch up on that 30 or 40 years of backlog of infrastructure like we've done in other areas. So I don't want y'all to lose focus. I think, Commissioner Hardy, you make really good points that we should always be, we should never be, committed blindly to what happened in the past just because it's always been that way. But I think strategically, we should always be trying to improve the value of the asset because it is being used. It's something that everybody uses every day in this city. We should always be trying to invest and improve it, which, concurrently adds value to the sales price if you ever decided to sell it. So I don't see that we have any other option here on the table here. We don't have, time isn't on our side. A transaction to get rid of the utility would take 11, 12 years if it happened, if you started now. And we need to fix these problems because they're deteriorating and getting worse in some areas. And we've got a plan. Ed's brought together a really ingenious set of ways for us to fix this thing and make it the best. And who knows, by that time, it may become a brand to where the residents not only recognize the value as an asset because it does pay into the general fund, it pays for playgrounds, it pays for police, but it now becomes a cool thing because of, look at our trends in carbon footprint. If we can be carbon, y'all set a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030, 2035, you'll blow any city away in Palm Beach County with that kind of a bragging right. You don't get that necessarily with some other options, but it's healthy to look from different angles and to consider all your options, but we need to remember kind of the journey of how we got to this point. And it's painful to now be here and having concerns about our ability to, go forward with this bonding issue with some certainty because of COVID-19, but it's just life. That's just the way we find ourselves. So I think we'll pull together a good program. We'll come up with some options. The people who can't pay right now, the administrative order that I instituted last month, went through April 30th. I'm going to need some input from y'all on how you want to extend that, if you want to go to the end of May. And then once we get back into re-implementing what a disconnect looks like, when we start that, you know, it's not an easy switch that you just throw on all of a sudden, because you've got this backlog of people who haven't been paying. We need to have that kind of, with Bruce's, you know, thoughts. How do we come up with a program they can pay over time? We've had conversations internally about using their deposits to help offset some of their, and they can pay that back over time too. There's options for us to get money into this fiscal year in revenue and to really do a lot of good things, work together, recognize the difficulty that our residents and our businesses are going through, and pull together with a plan. I think staff has that. And I just wanted to interject in that little bigger context as y'all go forward, make some decisions. But I would like to hear some conversation about extending the suspension of disconnects, so that I can have some input from y'all before I move to administrative order.
Okay.
So anyway, that's me.
Mr. Hardy?
Yeah. You know, the first thing I'll say is, you know, profit ain't a profit unless you could put your hands on it and do what you want with it. And, you know, the profits that we would have booked this year, we wouldn't have been able to touch, because we would have had to use them to build fund balance. And, you know, that's a profit that doesn't profit us any, really, except for our ability to finance, you know, future stuff. And, you know, what I'll say is, you never know until you pick up the phone and call. And what I'll also say is that our situation is a little different from Bureau's, because Bureau was forced into what was really an unfair negotiation with Florida Power and Light, because their voters put their backs against the wall by voting to require them to sell to FPL. So they had no leverage. When they approached FPL, they were required to approach FPL, and they were required to sell to FPL. And that's not a situation that anyone who's holding an asset and wants to sell it. No one with an asset wants to be in that situation, to have one buyer and to have to sell it, and to have a timeline on which to sell it. That's not the situation for which I'm advocating, right now. All I'm saying is that we should perhaps pick up the phone, and rather than speculating about FPL's posture with respect to us and with respect to this, what I think should be a transaction that's on the table, we should actually figure out what their position is. The other thing is, I do recognize, I think it was back in 2014, we had two different companies value the utility. And I'm pretty sure Professor, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, the guy up at NYU, Damodaran, would probably be very pleased with the valuation that was done on these companies that were very textbook. They added up all the cash flow and discounted it, yada, yada, yada. And it turned out that the utility was worth about $100 million to us and about $80 million to a buyer, because there are things we get from the utility that a buyer wouldn't be able to get out of it according to that transaction. Our financials now are completely different than they were back then, frankly. And the value of the utility to us surely has declined, because our contribution has declined, right? And it's going to decline by about $1.5 million total over the next several years. Right? Aren't we reducing the contribution that we take from the electric utility every year by about $300,000? Am I wrong about that, Bruce?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay, so that would reduce, if the dividend that we get from the utility determines the value, and our dividend decreases, that reduces the value to us, right? And so, I really think, we should consider picking up the phone and calling Florida Power and Light and seeing what their posture is relative to us, rather than speculating about it, because we are doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, and wondering why it's so different. We're in a business we shouldn't be in. Some businesses we just shouldn't be in. And there's no reason to keep repeating it over and over again. And no matter, we've done a lot, Mr. City Manager, Ed, you've done a lot. Walt Gill's done a lot. The whole team has done a lot to improve the electric utility. But the perception of the utility has, among folks in Palm Beach County, has changed very little. And that has a drag on this city overall. And that will be the case because we can't do what FPL does. People know that there will be a disparity. And we won't go there. But so, look, that's not an issue we're going to discuss. I'm a yay on extending it to May 30, the administrative order to May 30th, or May 31st or whatever.
I just wanted to just clarify a couple of things too. The lowering, the less of the contribution that we have to the general fund and weaning ourselves off of that was done in the very beginning. Many of you will remember I was screaming sell when I first got here because of a lot of the reliability issues that we had years back. And once I got in, and in fact, I was at the FMPA meeting when we were crowding out of our situation and when they were going back and forth about Vero Beach, when that was still very much relevant. And they had been, as the city manager said, 10 years. The big issue for them was that they needed to get everyone involved in the FMPA to all agree. Every single vote had to agree to let them out of their contracts with like how we have St. Lucie and Stanton and our obligations. Every single one of them had to agree because then the remaining municipalities were going to have to pick up that load. Is that not correct, Ed? Yeah, I remember that. That was the big issue, and getting them all
That's
to
correct.
do it and taking more responsibility and more financial responsibility for it was something that was difficult. And that was one of the things that took a long time. What we were trying to do by lessening our contribution to ourselves is having basically lateral conversations. We're investing in our utility and we're doing that. But what would the contribution look like from an FP&L? What is the type of money that we would get as a city from FP&L? What are those benefits? And us lessening our amount is not because we're trying to make ourselves struggle. It's to try to be responsible, to say this is what other municipalities do and that have FP&L, and we're trying to be that responsible person too. So we're not only bringing the rates down to parity, but we're also doing the type of money that you would receive on an annual basis from a subcontractor, from a vendor, was the same thing, so that we're starting to operate our general fund within the limits of what other cities do. So we're being responsible for it. That was one of the reasons for it. And as to the May 30th, I'm good with that as well. Commissioner Hardy?
Is my hand up somewhere?
You got you got to push.
What I'll say is, we're trying to get to a goal to lower the, there's the city and there's the electric utility. And the electric utility gives us money, and we're trying to decrease the amount of money that the electric utility gives us to match what we would get, for example, from FPL, so that the electric utility isn't giving us more than what we would get from FPL. So to me, frankly, given that it's going to continue to be difficult to operate this electric utility, the fact that in the future, supposedly, we won't be getting any more value from Lake Worth Utility as a city, right, from the general fund, given that we won't be getting any more value from Lake Worth Utilities than we would be getting from FPL, even though Lake Worth Utilities would continue to have difficulties doing these sorts of things, that bolsters the case for moving away, for at least inquiring as to whether FPL would want to come into the city. Because at that point, the difference to us is nil if what we believe about the contribution we will be receiving at the end of this period when we reduce these contributions is true, that it matches FPL. The other thing I'll say is, I'm not saying, I don't want folks out there getting confused and say I am advocating for us to sell. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for us to inquire, because I see no harm in the inquiry. And so, that's it. That's all. But hey, yeah.
Okay. Tim?
Is my hand up?
No.
Well, I've got the button here that says it is. Anyhow, Ed and I have alluded to what Commissioner Hardy is going after. I'd like to say that at the end of this virus, good things will come out of it. Hopefully the recognition that teachers have a much harder job than previously, maybe their pay scale will go up. Healthcare will be improved. But the economy of scale for our electric company isn't going to change at all. The perception, and I want to, that's always been a problem. It's not going to change. And, and that's assuming that we don't get hit with a hurricane. Can we base it on how our bonding performance and the bonding sale, or the market of this bond, which is totally all about the electric? Can we have a conversation about talking to FP&L based on information we get from the bond response? The perception, and if we're hopefully, I think it's a reasonable thing to do, and we would have some criteria to start to force us to think about it. Perception has never changed in the 20 years or more that I've been here. Even though we were at parity, nobody ever said, "Wow, it's great that we own our own electric company." The perception has always been bad mouthing, whether we were at parity or even lower rates. That's not going to change either. So I would hope that we are open-minded enough to, we have enough expenses in consulting fees. I don't even think we have to hire a consultant at this point to inquire as to somebody in their organization, to talk to somebody in our organization, to whether it's even something that we want to pursue. But I would hope that the issues that we're struggling with, that might be, I think it is something to be considered, because none of the bad things are going to change or get any better. I don't see the perception of Lake Worth's management, and that is no reflection on Ed's. Ed's been a miracle worker. Finances have improved. Mike has done his, miracle work, but Lake Worth is still going to be, we can go back to all the derogatory phrases that come with Lake Worth, but I just think that it's a reasonable thing to do, and I'm good with extending the no shut off.
Well, like I've said from the very beginning, when we started the whole rate parity issue, was that no dollars were ever allocated and no commission would ever approve of an advertising or marketing campaign. I've been talking for how many years about putting a one piece in for all the realtors in this community. This goes back 3 utility directors ago. So Ed, this isn't directed towards you in any way, shape, or form, because I know you've worked on all this stuff and done it now. But we had a big event for realtors. We had a big, whatever. But other than that, there's serious marketing dollars that should have been spent on that from a branding perspective, and it wasn't done. It wasn't approved, and we never had the money to do it. And shame on us. We should have done that back then, and it is. But I will tell you this: I know that we're doing it now. And sorry. Again, doesn't have anything to do with you. But back in the day, many utility directors back, we didn't come out, talking about it, and people still have that perception, and that's stinky. They will understand it more better, and then they also will. The new people that are coming into town are like, why are people always talking about the electric? The electric's great around here. It's funny, all the new people that are moving here are like, why did people say don't go there? Why did people say you don't want that? We've moved past that with the new people in, but we still have that reputation with the older clients, that's for sure. Commissioner Maxwell, do you have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also too support extending the manager's executive order to the end of the month. And can we move on, Madam Mayor?
I'm ready. We're way past our time anyway.
Well, can I ask if this bonding market or I don't know if there's a timeline expectation or can we revisit the possibility of conversation about it anyhow? If the bonding isn't everything that we're hoping for.
We're going to have to revisit everything on a regular basis through this, especially. We're going to have to watch the numbers and see where we're at, what we need to do. Right, Ed?
Yes,
Well,
that's correct.
Then by moving on, I want to move on to the expectation that we will revisit the possibility.
Yeah, I think we have to.
Oh,
Okay. For what issue? All right. Yeah, I'm not sure where it's going on. All right, let's move on. We're going to go on to item C, 2020 Earth Day announcement of CO2 reductions in our electric supply. Ed?
Yes, we should have up on the screen our announcement, I believe. Is it
No.
up on the
Get
screen?
a little delay in our presentations.
I may be having trouble getting that particular slide up on the screen. So what I'll do is I'll speak to it and suggest that folks visit citizen-owned-energy.com. But this may have been overlooked as part of telling our good story by most of the folks out there, but we did make this announcement in time for Earth Day, that we do anticipate that by 2025, we will have reduced our CO2 emissions to less than 50% of the 2005 numbers. So why is that important? Well, 2005 was established as the general benchmark. There's many people in the industry that use that as the benchmark, with the goal being to get to less than half of that emission rate by 2025. Pleased to report, and we announced it on Earth Day, that we would be at less than 50% of our 2005 emission rate by 2025. That's quite an undertaking. We're aided by the fact that we have a large nuclear investment, and of course, the significant commitment to solar that we've made going forward. So not only will we be more than 50% carbon free in our energy supply, but we will have reduced our emissions rate by more than 50%. I'm not aware that there's any other municipality that can make that statement. We will lead, as we talked earlier in the annual report discussion, we'll lead with a significant growth in solar per customer, and we'll be well below that 2005 baseline number. So we're on our way to do that. We put the pieces in place to go do that. And regardless of where we go with the utility, we will be able to say that we've accomplished that. And I don't think there's any other utility going to be able to say they're as green as Lake Worth Beach is. So we're certainly on our way. So that announcement is on the citizen-owned-energy.com landing page, if you will, and anybody can go to and take a look at it and see the details of the numbers. I can add to that too, is that on the bubble, if you will, is the investment in the Stanton coal plant, which is nearing end of life. It's not owned by us; we're a part owner in it. It's owned by OUC, and I'm sure that they're revisiting what the future may have in store for that particular unit. But should that unit be retired, and we are a part owner, and it's provided us great value over many years. But in today's environment, we can see a significant improvement in not only our operating costs, but a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions if that unit were to be retired. Now, it's not yet quite at its retirement date, but it's something that we look forward to, and certainly in the planning horizon, to be able to see what the fate of that unit will be. So should that unit be retired in the next few years, that's going to improve our carbon footprint reduction even more. So we're poised to get even better from an environmental point of view. I also point out that we continue to grow as a utility. We're not a shrinking, dying utility here. We are growing, and our numbers, 1% plus growth in customer base is a positive sign. So we know that customers have an alternative to move someplace else, but we're telling a good story here, and it's not one that we're making up as we go. These are things that are in fact coming true because of steps that were taken many years ago by your predecessors, and in the last 1, 2, and 3 years by this body itself. So thank you for allowing us to make those commitments to continue that path on the green chart. So we're doing the right things and going in the right direction. So thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Great news. Vice Mayor Pro Tem, did you have something on this? Your hand's still up.
No, my hand was up for the last one. Thanks anyway.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Vice Mayor Pro Tem? Commissioner Maxwell?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Robinson?
I don't want to be, I hope it's not negative, but I was wondering what the relationship was to FP&L's green numbers and our green numbers.
Seeing specific percentages quoted by FPL, they may be out there. We just haven't found them, haven't focused on them, but we'll be significantly below the state of Florida number by 2025. And I mean significantly, well below it, maybe 25 to 50% below what the state of Florida numbers would be. So we're taking a big bite out of our carbon emissions by going in the direction that we're going.
We're doing projects with FP&L too, and they're solar, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you for pointing it out. Yes, the FMPA Solar 1, where we took 10 megawatts, is actually developed by FPL's cousin, if you will, within the same holding company, NextEra. It is a related entity.
We have a good relationship with FP&L. We do a lot of work, good work together.
Yes, we do. We pay them a substantial amount every year for transmission charges, which are going up and we're absorbing in our budgets. But I know FPL is probably listening to this phone call or this message, but they're a great company, and we're a very good company, a great company in our own right, and we serve our customers well, and we're doing better all the time.
We are now.
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda items. City Clerk, are you there?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Do you have any?
I do. I have 4 comments. The first is from Ramsey Stevens at 618 South K Street here in Lake Worth. He says, Madam Mayor, honorable commissioners, as a member of the Electric Utility Advisory Board, I strongly encourage you to heed Commissioner Robinson's call to use the advisory boards to develop ideas to support our community in this historic time of need. Specifically, I ask that you grant our board permission to explore opportunities to become a more sustainable utility and provide economic relief to our community. Our board formally asked permission to do that. Asked to just do this at the Utility Commission meeting on March 3rd, but still have not received an answer. I hope you will provide us one this evening. Thanks for your service. Then Wes Blackman writes from 241 Columbia Drive, writes, in looking through the backup PowerPoint material before this meeting, I don't see a breakdown of residential and commercial accounts in the numbers of customers that would have had their service disconnected between March 18th and April 24th. That would be good information to have, as commercial rates are generally higher than residential rates. We've experienced a widespread reduction in economic activity since the various stay-at-home orders have been issued, and the closing of bars and restricting restaurants to takeout only service. I'm afraid that if some sort of relief is not provided for commercial electric and water utility customers, we may lose them and they won't be coming back. Can the city do something, anything, to assist businesses during this unusual time? And David Arm of 212 Iris Ave, Lantana, Florida, writes, as president of the Greater Lantana Chamber of Commerce, with over 60 businesses located in Lake Worth Beach, I would like to ask the commission to consider some form of rate rebate for commercial users. As we all know, our businesses are under extreme duress during the current pandemic crisis, and many, especially those with storefront presences in Lake Worth Beach, are surviving day to day due to severe revenue disruptions. Other utilities, such as FP&L, have announced discounts as much as 25% for their customers, passing along their savings from the reduced price of their fuel. From FP&L news release dated March 29th, FP&L responds to ongoing COVID-19 pandemic by lowering customer bills for the second time this year. Lower fuel costs are enabling FP&L to issue a one-time decrease of nearly 25% for the typical residential customer bill beginning May 1st. FPL plans to issue the savings through a one-time bill decrease in order to accelerate savings to customers amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, rather than the standard practice of spreading out savings over the remainder of the year. We would appreciate the Commission's consideration of some sort of rate relief for the utility commercial customers in this time of extreme hardship. Thank you, and please stay safe and healthy. And finally, we have a comment from Ryan Oblander at 1702 North A Street. FP&L is issuing a one-time reduction to its customers in May due to lower fuel costs, but it doesn't even amount to much savings, perhaps $25 for 1,000 kilowatt hours. Can we afford matching that? For customers using solar net metering, if there was any incentive introduced by the city, would they be included as well? Obviously, fuel costs are not a huge factor in their bills, and with our current billing software, a slash in the fuel cost line item would not help them. At the last commission meeting, I offered a suggestion that I hoped would be considered because it was not mine alone. Small businesses are struggling. The federal government has offered PPP loans that would be forgivable if they were used towards things such as utilities. It would help them tremendously if they were allowed an advance against their utility deposits, money that the city can't spend anyway, along with a plan for repayment, perhaps by application only or case-by-case basis. I appreciate your time and consideration. That's the end of the comments, Madam Mayor.
Very much. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second? I need it.
Second.
Second, okay. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, folks, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all so very much. Great meeting.